All right, Larry Krueger here at Levi Stadium after John Lynch's presser from the Pig and a Pickle Krueg Show with a little breakdown of everything that happened down here in Santa Clara. So John started his talk today, and of course we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corners Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, on the Monterey Peninsula. Thanks to Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. All right, let's talk a little bit about what happened down here in Santa Clara. Niners General Manager John Lynch spoke to the media, his obligatory pre-draft presser, where they try to say absolutely nothing at all. But he started by offering prayers for the Indianapolis Colts director of college scouting, who lost his wife suddenly this week. John said that he called Chris Ballard, the GM of the Colts, and offered his condolences today. The news of the day is the Niners promoted Dustin Perry, I believe, as the Vice President of Health and Performance. It was an internal hire, so he worked for the Niners before. They looked at people in the rugby world, in the football world, the basketball world, and decided to go with Dustin Perry, or might be Dustin Penny as the Vice President of Health and Performance. As far as the draft is concerned, because that's what you guys really care about, John's excited. He says we go through our process. It's a well-oiled machine. He says it starts with the scouts in May, and then there's the season, the coaches, the medical evals, the research and development, the analytics team. He said he's proud of the collective effort. He says we look to build a consensus, and we do best with our picks when we actually build a consensus. So it sounds like that's what they're looking to achieve, is some form of a consensus between coaches, scouts, research and development, medical people. It's a total team effort. He was asked what he wants in a defensive end, and he said, man, we want a guy who can set the edge in the run game. What does that mean? That typically means no to guys who are 230, 240, 250, and yes to guys who are 265, 270, 280. So I think they probably want a bigger defensive end. He also said they're looking for a guy that can pressure the quarterback. Didn't say sack the quarterback, he said pressure the quarterback. It sounded an awful lot to me like the Niners may be taking Shamar Stewart at 11. Because he is a bigger defensive end. He can set the edge in the run game, and he led A&M in pressures. He can absolutely pressure the quarterback. So if you're looking for somebody who can set the edge and pressure the quarterback, Shamar Stewart's probably your guy. Somebody asked about, how do you balance production versus traits? And he said, hey, look, you're looking for both. You want production and you want traits. So I know a lot of Niner fans would say, well, that should preclude Shamar Stewart. He doesn't have a lot of sack production. But I don't know that the Niners view sack production as production. They may view pressures, where he led A&M in pressures, as production. So, if there was if he gave away anything there, it sounded like he liked Shamar Stewart. That's my takeaway. He was asked about the defining characteristic of the 2025 draft, and he says it's the depth. The Niners have 20 players in this draft that they gave first-round grades to, and 200 draftable players, up from 170 last year. So they think it's a deep draft. John joked, saying that there was somebody in the top 6 he's a buddy of, a GM, who said, hey, man, I heard you were going to trade up, and you haven't called me. So in other words, the Niners are not trading up. The Niners will not be trading up in this draft. I don't think. They could trade up a spot if somebody great falls in their lap, but I don't think it's going to happen. I asked Lynch about, the ability to trade on draft day. Some people think there's going to be a lot of trades. Other people say there'll be none. He says that, he thinks that there's going to be a lot of teams in the first round, at least, that just pick at where they're at, because he says there's a lot of teams that want to trade back, but there's not a lot of teams that want to trade up. And so it's probably unlikely that the Niners will be able to trade back, and they probably should get ready to pick at number 11. He said, there's 5 or 6 teams that probably want to trade back in the first round, and you got to have 5 or 6 teams that are willing to trade up. And it doesn't sound like that's the landscape right now. He said Robert Sala has been a big positive in the draft prep meetings. He says it's been fun to work with in meetings. Regarding Brock Purdy showing up to OTAs without a deal, he said, man, that's Brock. He's clear-minded. He's not going to let anything prevent him from doing what he wants to do. So Lynch admitted there's been some progress in contract talks, but nothing definitive. Nothing ready to be announced, but Brock did show up for OTAs. A lot of people believe that's an indication that maybe a deal is, imminent, but Lynch did not speak to that. I think it's really more about the fact that Brock Purdy is a competitor, and he knows that you got to be there. So he's going to get this negotiation done, but he's going to be here the whole time. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to let some contract negotiation or some exchange of offers or whatever preclude him from doing his job, which is being the quarterback of this football team. And so when Lynch said, hey man, that's Brock, in other words, this guy's a leader. He wants to be here. He wants to play, and he's showing us he wants to play. So I'm sure they'll get that done. I asked Lynch if Brock, because they do love him so much and he is their quarterback of the future, do they listen to him as far as guys that he wants? I saw a quote this week where Brock Purdy was absolutely glowing in his endorsement of Jaylen Null, the slot receiver from Iowa State. And Lynch said, Brock does have draft opinions. He said sometimes it's usually not until the 6th or 7th year that players get their draft, personnel opinions. But he said Brock does have draft opinions, and he says he likes some of those Iowa State receivers. And I think he was referring to his comments about Jaylen Null. So that being said, I got to think that the 49ers are going to get Brock Purdy a receiver in this draft. And I got to think that he's going to have some say in it. And so look for Jaylen Null on day 2 of the draft to be the Niners pick in round 2 or maybe round 3. They've got 2 picks in round 3. They got 1 pick in round 2. I don't know that he'll be there in round 3. I know that he'll be there in round 2. Will they take him at 43? They probably should. Jaylen Null is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And if Brock Purdy wants him, all the more reason to draft him. So look for that in the draft. Lynch said there's been good talks and communication with George Kittle regarding contract extension talks, but nothing to announce. Kittle did not show up today for the OTAs. I don't think the Niners are overly concerned. Fred Warner did. Brock Purdy did. George Kittle didn't. Also, it was brought up that Dvonte Adams felt disrespected when the Niners pursued him in the offseason. I guess there was a report out that said that the Niners told Dvonte Adams, hey man, we're looking for wholesale prices, not retail. We're not looking to buy retail. We're going to pay wholesale. Lynch said, hey man, wasn't me. I didn't say that. But, and Lynch, made it perfectly clear, like, look, there was no disrespect. We respect this player immensely. We're probably just somebody was probably just reflecting our budgetary constraints. But they love Dvonte Adams, and they have no disrespect was intended when they said, hey man, if you want to come here, you got to come here for wholesale prices. And then Dvonte said, I'm not a wholesale kind of a guy. So Lynch cleared the air on that. Then we had a chance to talk to CMC, and he said a number of things. I think the thing that probably stood out the most, and probably the only newsworthy item, is that CMC says he has no lingering effects of the PCL strain. He has no lingering effects from the dual Achilles tendonitis that he has, and that he's a full go right now. He said, right now he has no limitations physically, and he's ready to roll. So that was really great to hear. All right, that does it for the update from here in Santa Clara. Still a couple days to go before the draft. If you said to me, what are my takeaways from today? I'll give you my takeaways. It sounds to me, and this is just, who knows? There could be a lot of misdirection here. There could be none. But it sounds to me, if you said, what's your takeaway? I would say look for Shamar Stewart in round 1 and look for Jaylen Null on day 2, either in round 2 or 3. Those would be my takeaways. I think the Niners would like to trade back. I think it's pretty clear they don't want to trade up. They're going to stay where they're at. Who knows? Maybe a Mason Graham or somebody like that may fall in their lap. It'll be interesting to see, would they take Mason Graham if he did fall in their lap? I think they would. But if Mason Graham doesn't fall in their lap, the report is that they'll be choosing between Walter Nolan and Shamar Stewart. And based on what I heard today, I would say the Niners are going to draft Shamar Stewart at 11 and Jaylen Null on day 2. All right, live from Santa Clara, Larry Kruger for the Pig and a Pickle Krueg Show. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krueg Show on YouTube.